From Lagos, the nation's commercial capital, this is the news at 10, live from Channels Television. Reporting tonight,
Ijoma Oyato.
Hello and welcome. Tonight, former governor of Ondo State, Olusegun Agagu, is buried at his hometown in Ijodo, Okitipupa local government area of Ondo State. Nigeria's Civil Aviation Authority confirms that ill-fated plane carrying the governor's body had been certified to fly before the crash. Governor Adams Oshomole accuses the NNPC of failing to pay 2.3 trillion naira into the Federation account. And bad weather forces Italian rescuers to postpone search for hundreds of African migrants still missing after their boat mishap.
On business news tonight, interbank rates averaged 12% this week, supported by an ample supply of dollars.
And in sports news, Lagos State government dangles $80,000 for winners of the 2013 edition of the Governors Cup International Tennis Championship.
We begin tonight from Ijodo, Okitipupa local government area, the hometown of the former governor of Ondo State, Olusegun Agagu, who was buried this afternoon. His wife, Olufunke Agagu, immediate family members, and former governors were all in attendance to pay their last respects. Earlier in the day, a funeral service was held at St. Paul's Anglican Church, Ijodo. The officiating Reverend and Bishop of the Diocese on the Post, Anglican Communion, Right Reverend Ebun Ogunle, asked everyone to always live a life worthy of emulation. He says only God can determine the length of time one will live on earth and when the journey will be terminated. The President, Dr. Goodluck Jonathan, was represented at the funeral service by the Police Affairs Minister, Caleb Olubolade. Governor Agagu was laid to rest in the grounds of the Anglican Cemetery in Ijodo. Well, Associated Airlines Embraer 120, which crashed early Tuesday morning, was certified fit to fly prior to departure. Well, that's according to the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority. At a press briefing in Lagos, the Director, Consumer Protection of the NCAA, Adamu Abdullahi, said the airline also had a current certificate of airworthiness valid till October the 22nd, 2013. Meanwhile, the Director of Aeromedical Services, Dr. Teresa Bassi, added that the survivors of the crash were responding to treatment.
We are happy to say that as of yesterday, we had 7 survivors, and they are doing very well in the various hospitals where they are under admission. The NCA, along with other agencies in the aviation sector, have visited them physically. We've spoken to those that were in a position to speak with, and they're doing very well. The families have been met with, and in some cases we're continuing with visits to the families to pay condolence visits, and would like to say that as we speak, we've done over 80% of that. And we continue to pray to the good Lord to continue to support the families and those who are in hospital, and we know that they will gradually get back to their feet.
Well, as Nigerians continue to grieve over the Associated Airline crash, which claimed 13 lives yesterday, passengers are advocating the need for stiffer regulations by the various regulatory agencies in the country. Some of them who spoke to our crew at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport in Abuja were disappointed that local flights continue to crash, resulting in the death of many. They also urged the federal government to closely monitor the activities of all airline operators, including those that operate chartered flights.
Early one day after an Associated Airline flight conveying the remains of the former governor of Ondo State, late Olusegun Agagu, crashed in Lagos minutes after takeoff, airline passengers and operators have resumed normal flights with an appeal to the federal government for increased regulation.
It's a very sad incident, and I think we have problem of safety in Nigeria. the regulatory authorities are not doing their job, they should take lives as serious as possible, because these aircraft that have been flying, most of them maybe are outdated.
It's a terrible thing, actually. It's a very terrible thing. I was here, I just came in actually, so I just heard the news. I was like, whoa, what happened? What really happened?
The station manager of one of the private airlines, Mr. Yusuf Dan Hassan, who prayed for the repose of the souls of the victims of the crash, describes the incident as an unfortunate one which no airline operator wishes to experience.
We are all sad, and we are still mourning the loss of our loved one. And Associated Airlines, we know they have a good safety record, but if at times, if something comes, it comes from God. So we are not praying for such thing to happen again.
Although the Minister of Aviation in the statement condoled with families of the victims, some passengers expressed worries that the nation's airspace is not safe.
It is not strange to any Nigerian anymore that our aircraft system is becoming a calamity to the entire nation.
Something needs to be done urgently to save both the life of the pilots and Nigerians.
With the crash of the Associated Airlines flight, the hope of airline passengers and operators of ending the year without a plane crash has again been dashed, as memories of the December 2012 crash, which claimed the lives of several Nigerians, has again been rekindled.
Now, to discuss the state of the aviation industry in the light of current developments, I'm now being joined on the news at 10 by a seasoned pilot, Captain Benson Osa. Thank you so much for joining us on the news at 10.
Thank you.
And again, our deepest condolences to everyone who's been affected. But before we go into it, let's just start from what the NCAA have said concerning the plane. They've said that it was certified fit to fly, and it had an airworthy certificate, valid till October the 22nd, 2013. In your experience, if everything was all right from that end, then what could have happened? Why did it crash?
Okay. First, my condolences to everybody involved in this and to Nigerians. We need to understand that what NCAA said, they said with regards to the paperwork involved. The airplane was certified okay to fly. That means the engineers of the company of Associated Airlines, they certified the airplane fit to fly. It had a certificate of airworthiness. Okay, that certificate is issued whenever an airplane has undertaken mandatory maintenance. And it is issued on a yearly basis or on an 18-month basis. In some countries, it could be 24-month basis. But that does not mean that an airplane that has a certificate of airworthiness is automatically airworthy for the period for which the certificate is issued. There are many things during the life of that airworthiness certification that invalidates the serviceability of an aeroplane. If an airplane has a certificate of airworthiness expiring in 2013 and a truck runs into the airplane on the ground while it is parked, you can't say it's airworthy.
Okay, we're mindful that a lot of the families are still grieving at the moment, But from the perspective of a pilot, what are those things that the pilot himself would need to do, on the day of flight to ensure that the plane is good and ready to go, in spite of all the other paperwork? Being a pilot yourself, you've flown so many airlines. What is it that the pilot has to do to say, yes, I can go up in the air with this plane and we'll get there?
Well, we have what we call pre-departure inspections. The pilots are not engineers, so they can't really get into the heart of an engine, for example, and be able to detect that, hey, 5 minutes down the road, this engine is going to fail, or this airframe, that's the body of the airplane, something is going to break. There's very little. The pilot will do what we call a walk around, just check generally that the airplane is okay. There are set procedures to follow, and Once the pilot has done that, the pilot will do an acceptance of what the mechanics have done. The mechanics will have done, they will have carried out their own checks and signed the airplane out for operation. The pilot will do his own, and then he will also sign to say, I accept. But we need to understand that we have a problem. We really do have a problem, because right now we seem to be the only country where this thing is just coming up on a regular basis. And I don't want Nigerians to start NCAA bashing or Ministry of Aviation bashing, but the fact is we really do have problems.
But the Aviation Ministry is very vocal about regulations, transformation, you know, they seem to be very tough on regulations, etc. And this thing keeps happening. So if we don't bash them, who then do we bash? We can't bash the passengers going into the plane. What can we do? Because that happened just a year ago or thereabouts, and everything we were told is such a thing will never happen again, investigations are on, etc. People are angry, people are worried. Okay. From the perspective of someone who is on the receiving end of these services, you're worried yourself. What would be your first, recommendation?
Investigations are ongoing. We don't know what's really happened here. But Nigerians have a right to be worried. Whenever I'm in the cockpit of an airplane that I'm flying and I see Nigerians boarding, I'm deeply worried, really. I am deeply worried. Worried in the sense that there's a lot of things going on in the industry that Nigerians are not privy to. Right now, because investigations are ongoing, I don't even want to speculate on what might have led to the crash. I want to go into the minds of the pilots, which is a very important thing for us. What was going on in the minds of the pilots at the time this thing happened? Because on the national newspapers today, a retired senior colleague of ours mentioned that the pilots ought to have been able to keep the airplane in the air. Okay,
before we go into what was seen on the pages of newspapers, right, what is that exact problem you're talking about that is wrong with our industry? What is it that is wrong now?
NCAA, as the regulatory body, they really are trying their best, but they are confining themselves only to the paperwork. There is a lot of things that paperwork doesn't solve. Like, for example, this ill-fated aeroplane has been on ground for some time. When an airplane is on ground for an appreciable length of time, questions need to be asked. If it's not flying, even though it has a certificate of airworthiness, how is it kept on ground? There is what is called protective maintenance. Is that protective maintenance being done while the airplane is kept on ground? If the airplane is kept on ground, is it kept in an enclosed area like what we call the hangar? Or is it kept in an open space outside where the elements, rain, sun, can beat it for an appreciable length of time? These things degrade aeroplanes. You can't say an airplane is airworthy, and yet that airplane is not flown for 6 months. And the owners or the operators park it out in the sun. Right now at Murtala Mohammed Airport, the domestic side, there is a place that looks like graveyard of aeroplanes.
So what you're saying is that on paper, our planes are fine.
They could be fine,
but in practice, they are not.
May not be fine. They may not be fine because my finding today about this airplane indicated that just 2 days ago, the engineers were now doing things. Maybe they got this job to do. They were now doing things to put the airplane into service against yesterday. They were doing the routine maintenance. The question I would like to ask is that, couldn't they have been doing this routine maintenance on a weekly basis or on a bi-weekly basis, depending on what is set out by the manufacturers that they ought to do?
Again, I'm going to ask what you recommend now to get us out of this issue, just as we round up.
There is a very, very important thing I would like to mention here, and this has been ongoing for some time. NCAA is aware of it. and that is what is going on in the minds of pilots. There are airlines out there in Nigeria. They are owing salaries to their pilots and engineers. Months of salaries are unpaid. What that means is that those airlines are not safe to operate. Because if a pilot is in his cockpit, he's thinking about his unpaid salaries. When incidents like this happen, his mind momentarily is not where it's supposed to be. There are engineers on ground that are not paid. There are ground support staff that are not paid for months. What are such airlines still doing in operation? NCAA, any airline that is unable to pay the salaries of their crew, NCAA should ground them. Because when a pilot takes an airplane into the air, that airplane is a missile. If the guy thinks only of, if the guy is thinking of his unpaid, many months of unpaid salaries, he is not going to be in a position to work well. Nigerians should also ask their relatives who are in the industry, is your airline paying you? If they are not paying, Nigerians should boycott airlines that are not paying the salaries of their staffs. This thing is a safety issue. If everything is okay on paper and we are still crashing, then there is something wrong.
We do indeed hope that the NCAA and other regulators are listening to us tonight and will do exactly what it is, what it takes to get Nigerians safe and to stop this sort of thing from happening again.
I hope so. I really hope so.
And with that, I'm going to thank you so much for sharing your insight with us here on the News at 10. Well, I've been speaking with a seasoned pilot, Captain Benson Osa. We've been looking at the state of the aviation industry in the light of the trend of crashes that we've seen in the last couple of years. Now, in part 2, after the break, Kano State Governor Rabiu Kwankwaso dismisses proposed national conference as a waste of time. That's in a moment. Do join us again.